Sheila Monroe had seen a lot in her courtroom, but nothing prepared her for the day a cop tried to break her. By noon, her life was about to become a battleground for justice. The morning started like any other in the Atlanta courthouse. Sheila, a 45-year-old black woman who had clawed her way from a rough childhood in the projects to become a respected judge, sat at her bench in courtroom 3B. Her robes draped over her shoulders like armor, and her sharp eyes scanned the room with a quiet authority that silenced even the most belligerent defendants. She was known for her fairness, her no-nonsense rulings, and a wit that could cut through tension like a knife. But today, the air felt heavier, charged with an undercurrent she couldn't quite place. The case was routine. A young black man, Darius Carter, accused of loitering and resisting arrest. Sheila had seen this script before: vague charges, a black defendant, and a white officer with a chip on his shoulder. Officer Mark Grayson, a burly man in his late 30s with a buzz cut and a permanent scowl, sat in the witness stand, his badge gleaming under the fluorescent lights. His testimony was rehearsed, almost robotic, as he described Darius acting suspiciously outside a convenience store and refusing to comply with orders. Sheila leaned forward, her pen tapping lightly on her notepad. "Officer Grayson," she said, her voice calm but firm, "you stated Mr. Carter was aggressive. Can you clarify what actions constituted aggression? Did he raise his voice? Make a threatening gesture?" Grayson's jaw tightened. "He didn't follow my commands, Your Honor." "That's aggressive enough." Sheila raised an eyebrow. "Not following commands isn't the same as aggression, officer. I need specifics. What did Mr. Carter do?" The courtroom grew quieter. Spectators, lawyers, court clerks, and a few reporters shifted in their seats. Grayson's face reddened slightly, and he leaned into the microphone. "He was uncooperative. Kept asking why I was stopping him. That's not how it works." Sheila's eyes narrowed. "So, a citizen asking why they're being detained is aggressive to you? Is that your testimony?" A murmur rippled through the room. Grayson's hands clenched into fists on the stand. "With all due respect, Your Honor, you weren't there. You don't know what it's like dealing with these people." The words hit like a slap. Sheila's pen stopped mid-tap. "These people?" she repeated, her voice low but laced with steel. "Care to elaborate, officer?" Grayson's eyes darted to the side, realizing his mistake, but his frustration boiled over. "You know what I mean. People like him. Always causing trouble, always playing the victim." The courtroom erupted in gasps and whispers. Darius's mother, seated in the back, let out a choked sob. Sheila's face remained composed, but her heart pounded. She'd heard those words before on the streets, in her youth, even in whispers from colleagues who thought she couldn't hear. But in her courtroom, this was new. "Officer Grayson," she said, her voice cutting through the noise, "you're out of line. This court operates on evidence, not prejudice. I suggest you stick to the facts." Grayson's face twisted, a mix of embarrassment and defiance. "Facts? The fact is, Your Honor, you're making this about race when it's about law and order. Maybe you're too biased to see that." The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Sheila's clerk, a young woman named Tara, froze at her desk, her eyes wide. The bailiff, an older man named Henry, shifted uncomfortably, his hand resting near his holster. Sheila felt the weight of every gaze in the room, some shocked, some curious, some hostile. She knew what Grayson was doing, challenging her authority, banking on his badge to shield him. She'd seen it before, but never so brazenly. "Officer," she said, her tone icy, "you're treading on dangerous ground. Apologize for that remark, or I'll hold you in contempt." Grayson leaned back, a smirk flickering across his lips. Contempt? For telling the truth? You're the one turning this into a circus. The murmurs grew louder. Sheila's pulse raced, but she kept her composure. She'd faced worse gang members, corrupt lawyers, even death threats when she'd ruled against powerful defendants. But this was different. This was personal. Grayson wasn't just disrespecting her. He was attacking her identity, her right to sit on that bench. "Last chance, officer," she said. "Apologize or face the consequences." Grayson stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "Consequences?" he spat. "You think you're untouchable up there? You're just another." He didn't finish. Henry, the bailiff, stepped forward, hand on his holster. "Sit down, officer," he barked. But Grayson didn't sit. Instead, he took a step toward the bench, his eyes locked on Sheila. "You don't get to lecture me," he growled. "I'm out there risking my life while you sit up there playing God." The courtroom was a powder keg. Tara clutched her phone, ready to call for backup. Darius's mother stood, tears streaming down her face, shouting, "Leave her alone!" Spectators were on their feet, some yelling, others recording on their phones. Sheila's mind raced. She could bang her gavel, call for order, but she knew Grayson wouldn't stop. His rage was too raw, too deep-seated. "Officer Grayson," she said, rising from her chair. "You're in contempt. Bailiff, remove him." Henry moved quickly, but Grayson was faster. In a blur of motion, he shoved past Henry, knocking him off balance, and charged toward the bench. The courtroom exploded in chaos. Spectators screamed. Tara dove under her desk. Sheila's heart leapt into her throat as Grayson vaulted over the railing, his nightstick in hand, his face a mask of fury. "You think you're better than me?" he roared, raising the stick. Time seemed to slow. Sheila's instincts kicked in not as a judge, but as a woman who'd grown up dodging danger in the streets. She grabbed her gavel, her only weapon, and stood her ground. "Back off, Grayson," she shouted, her voice booming with a strength that surprised even her. Grayson swung. The nightstick arced toward her, but Sheila ducked, the weapon grazing her shoulder. Pain shot through her arm, but adrenaline surged. She swung the gavel, aiming for his wrist. Connected with a crack, and Grayson yelped, dropping the stick. The courtroom was a cacophony of shouts and footsteps as Henry scrambled to his feet, drawing his taser. "Get down!" Henry yelled, but Grayson was beyond reason. He lunged again, grabbing Sheila's robe and yanking her toward him. Her hips slammed against the bench, and for a moment, she thought she'd fall. But Sheila was no stranger to fighting back. She drove her elbow into Grayson's chest, forcing him to stagger back. "You're done, Grayson," she shouted, her voice raw with fury. "This ends now." Henry fired the taser. The prongs hit Grayson's back, and he convulsed, collapsing to the floor. The courtroom fell silent. The only sounds Grayson's labored breathing and the distant wail of sirens. Sheila stood, trembling, her robe torn, her shoulder throbbing. She looked out at the room, Darius, wide-eyed in his seat. His mother sobbing. The spectators, some cheering, others stunned. Sheila's chest heaved as she caught her breath. She'd survived, but this was far from over. Grayson's attack wasn't just on her. It was on everything she stood for, and she wasn't about to let him win. As Henry cuffed Grayson, Sheila straightened her robes, her mind already racing. She could press charges, sure, but that wouldn't fix the rot Grayson represented. She'd seen too many cases like Darius's, too many officers like Grayson who hid behind their badges to wield their biases like weapons. This wasn't just a courtroom scuffle. It was a symptom of a deeper disease. She stepped back to her bench, ignoring the pain in her shoulder. "Court is adjourned," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos. "But this isn't over. Not by a long shot." As the room began to clear, Sheila sat, her hands shaking as she gathered her papers. Tara approached, her face pale. "Judge Monroe, are you okay? We need to get you to a hospital." Sheila shook her head. "Not yet. I've got work to do." She knew what came next wouldn't be easy. Grayson's attack would make headlines, and the backlash would be swift. She'd be painted as the villain by some, the hero by others. But Sheila didn't care about the noise. She cared about Darius, about the countless others who faced the same injustice. She cared about a system that let men like Grayson thrive. That night, as she sat in her office, the courthouse eerily quiet, Sheila began drafting a motion. Not just to charge Grayson, but to push for a broader investigation into the police department's practices. She'd use her platform, her voice, to demand change. It was risky. Her career, her safety could be on the line. But Sheila had never backed down from a fight. The next morning, the story broke. "Cop attacks Black judge in courtroom chaos," the headlines screamed. Social media erupted, with Justice for Sheila trending by noon. Protesters gathered outside the courthouse, some holding signs that read, "End police prejudice." Others, Grayson's supporters, called for Sheila's resignation, claiming she'd provoked him. Sheila watched from her office window, her shoulder bandaged, her resolve unshaken. She knew the road ahead would be brutal. Grayson's trial would be a circus, and the department would fight tooth and nail to protect its own. But she also knew something else. She wasn't alone. Darius's mother had already reached out, offering to testify about her son's treatment. Tara had compiled a list of similar cases, ready to back Sheila's motion. Even Henry, gruff as he was, had slipped her a note. "You did good, Judge." As she prepared for the fight of her life, Sheila thought back to her childhood, to the nights she'd spent dreaming of a world where justice wasn't just a word. She'd come too far to let Grayson or anyone take that from her. This wasn't just about her survival. It was about rewriting the rules, ensuring no one else had to face what she had. Grayson had swung first, but Sheila would strike last. And when she did, the impact would echo far beyond the courtroom. The days following the courtroom attack were a storm Sheila Monroe could have predicted but never fully prepared for. Her face was plastered across every news outlet, from local Atlanta stations to national networks. Pundits dissected her every word, her every action, turning her life into a spectacle. Some called her a hero, a Black woman standing tall against systemic racism. Others branded her a troublemaker, a judge who'd lost control of her courtroom. Through it all, Sheila kept her focus on what mattered. The fight for justice, not just for herself, but for Darius Carter and countless others like him. The courthouse was a fortress now, with extra security at every entrance. Sheila's office became a war room, stacked with case files, legal briefs, and a growing pile of letters, some supportive, others threatening. Tara, her clerk, sorted through them, her usual cheer replaced by a grim determination. "You've got more allies than you think, Judge," she said one evening, handing Sheila a stack of letters from community groups pledging support. "But the haters are loud too." Sheila nodded, her eyes scanning a letter from a local NAACP chapter. "Loud doesn't mean right," she said. "Let's keep moving." Her motion for a broader investigation into the Atlanta Police Department's practices was gaining traction. She'd filed it the day after the attack, citing Officer Mark Grayson's behavior as evidence of a deeper pattern of racial bias. She'd included data Tara had painstakingly compiled. Over 60% of arrests in Darius's precinct were of Black men, despite them making up less than 20% of the population. Use of force complaints against officers like Grayson were routinely dismissed. Sheila knew the numbers told only half the story. The other half lived in the fear etched on Darius's face, in his mother's tears, in the countless stories she'd heard from defendants over the years. The department fought back hard. Grayson's union released a statement claiming he'd been provoked by Sheila's aggressive questioning and was under extreme stress from his duties. They painted him as a dedicated officer, a family man with 2 kids, unfairly targeted by a biased judge. Sheila wasn't surprised. She'd seen this playbook before. Deflect, reframe, protect the badge at all costs. But this time they'd picked the wrong fight. Grayson's trial was set for 3 weeks later, a lightning-fast schedule driven by public pressure. Sheila was both a victim and a witness, a dual role that made her stomach churn. She'd have to testify, relive the moment he'd lunged at her, his nightstick inches from her face. The thought made her shoulder ache, though the bruise was fading. She didn't fear the courtroom she'd spent her life through, but she dreaded the circus it would become. Cameras, protesters, and Grayson's smug face across from her. She prepared meticulously. With Tara's help, she gathered statements from courtroom witnesses, including Henry, who'd seen Grayson's rage up close. Darius's mother, Ms. Evelyn Carter, insisted on testifying about her son's arrest, detailing how Grayson had harassed him for simply standing outside a store. "He called my boy a thug," she told Sheila over coffee one morning, her voice trembling with anger. "Darius was just waiting for me. He's a good kid, Judge. He don't deserve this." "I know," Sheila said, squeezing her hand. "We're going to make this right." But right felt like a moving target. The city was divided. Protests swelled outside the courthouse, with signs demanding justice for Judge Monroe, clashing with others proclaiming, "Back the blue." Social media was a battlefield, with justice for Sheila drowned out by hashtags like Grayson was framed. Anonymous threats flooded Sheila's inbox, some so vile Tara stopped showing them to her. "You're stirring up trouble," one read. "Watch your back." Sheila refused to cower. She met with community leaders, activists, and even a few sympathetic officers who admitted the department had a problem. She spoke at a town hall, her voice steady despite the hecklers in the back. "This isn't about one officer or one judge," she said, her words broadcast live on local news. "It's about a system that lets bias fester. We can't fix what we don't face." Her words struck a chord. Donations poured in for Darius's legal defense, and a petition for police reform gained thousands of signatures. But the backlash grew too. Grayson's supporters held rallies, claiming Sheila was anti-police and unfit for the bench. A conservative talk show host called her a danger to law and order, his words fueling a wave of online harassment. Sheila's phone buzzed constantly with notifications, until she turned it off and focused on the case. The trial arrived like a thunderstorm. The courtroom was packed, standing room only, with reporters cramming the back rows. Sheila sat in the witness box, her robes replaced by a navy blazer, her expression calm but resolute. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Lisa Gwynn, walked her through the incident. Grayson's inflammatory remarks, his refusal to comply, his attack. Sheila's voice never wavered, even as she described the moment his nightstick grazed her shoulder. "I thought he was going to kill me," she said, her words silencing the room. "But I wasn't going to let him win." Grayson's defense attorney, a slick man named Paul Whitaker, tried to twist the narrative. He painted Sheila as confrontational, suggesting she'd escalated the situation by questioning Grayson's testimony too aggressively. "Isn't it true, Judge Monroe," he asked, his tone dripping with condescension, "that you took Officer Grayson's words personally because of your own biases?" Sheila met his gaze, unflinching. If by biases you mean my commitment to fairness, then yes, I took it personally when an officer disrespected my courtroom and attacked my identity. But the only one who escalated was Officer Grayson when he raised his weapon. A murmur of approval rippled through the room. Whitaker faltered, his next question stumbling. Sheila's clarity was her weapon, honed by years on the bench. She didn't need to raise her voice. Her truth was loud enough. The trial's turning point came when Ms. Carter took the stand. Her testimony was raw, unfiltered, detailing not just Darius's arrest but a pattern of harassment by Grayson in their neighborhood. "He's got a vendetta," she said, tears streaming down her face. "He targets our boys, calls them names, makes them feel like they don't belong." The jury, a mix of races and ages, leaned forward, some visibly moved. Henry's testimony sealed Grayson's fate. "I've worked that courtroom 10 years, he said, his gruff voice steady. "Never seen an officer act like that. He wasn't just out of line, he was out of control." The jury's faces told Sheila everything. Grayson's badge wouldn't save him this time. The verdict came after 6 hours of deliberation. Guilty on charges of assault, battery, and conduct unbecoming an officer. The courtroom erupted, some cheering, others shouting in protest. Grayson sat stone-faced as the judge, a colleague of Sheila, sentenced him to 3 years in prison, with a recommendation for anger management and bias training. It wasn't enough for some, who wanted a harsher penalty, but Sheila felt a quiet satisfaction. Justice wasn't perfect, but it was progress. The fallout was immediate. The police union vowed to appeal, but public pressure forced the department to launch an internal review. Sheila's motion for a broader investigation was approved, with a task force appointed to examine arrest patterns and use of force complaints. Darius's charges were dropped, and he enrolled in a community college, his mother beaming at his side during a press conference Sheila attended. But the victory came at a cost. Sheila's life was under a microscope. Her address was leaked online, forcing her to move to a new apartment with private security. She received death threats, some so specific she kept a panic button under her desk. Her colleagues, while supportive, kept their distance, wary of being caught in the crossfire. Even her sister, a nurse in Chicago, begged her to step back. "You're fighting a war you can't win," she said over the phone. Sheila disagreed. She'd won battles before against poverty, against doubt, against a system that told her she didn't belong. This was just another fight, bigger but not impossible. She leaned on her allies. Tara, who became her confidant, Miss Carter, who invited her to dinner with Darius, and even Henry, who checked on her daily. "You're tougher than me, Judge," he said one day, a rare smile breaking through his stoic face. Months later, Sheila stood at a podium outside the courthouse, addressing a crowd of supporters and skeptics. The task force had released its first report, confirming systemic bias in the department's practices. Reforms were underway: new training, stricter oversight, a civilian review board. Sheila's voice carried over the crowd, steady and clear. "This isn't about tearing anyone down," she said. "It's about building a system where everyone is seen, heard, and judged by their actions, not their skin." The crowd cheered, but Sheila knew the work was far from done. Bias didn't vanish with one trial or one report. It lingered in hearts, in habits, in the quiet moments when people chose to look away. She'd keep fighting, not just for herself but for Darius, for Ms. Carter, for every person who'd been dismissed as these people. As she stepped down from the podium, a young girl approached, maybe 10 years old, holding a drawing of a judge in robes with Sheila's face. "I want to be like you," the girl said shyly. Sheila knelt, her eyes softening. "Then be brave," she said, "and never let anyone tell you who you can't be." That night, alone in her new apartment, Sheila sat with a glass of wine, the city's lights glittering outside. She thought of Grayson, now behind bars, and wondered if he'd ever understand the weight of his actions. She thought of the girl with the drawing, and the thousands like her who needed to see justice wasn't just a dream. The fight had changed her, scarred her, strengthened her, but it hadn't broken her. The battle for justice is never clean or easy. What do you think? Where do we draw the line between right and wrong, and how do we heal a divided community?